AITAS for charging my mum the same amount that I charge my other customers. When I lived with my parents, I did various odd jobs around the house to earn money, cleaning the rain gutters, replacing the air filters, changing the hoses on the washing machine, etc. My mum would pay me for these jobs, though it wasn't much, usually $20, and was more for me to have some spending cash while I was still in school. This was fine when I was living with my parents. Now, however, I live by myself in another city and work as a handyman. I typically charge by the hour as well as materials, and a trip fee if it's out of the area I normally service. The other day, Mum called and asked if I could come over and replace the hoses underneath the bathroom sink, as there was a leak. I said sure, no problem. I was coming from another job, and did not have the materials I knew I would need on hand, so I went to the home center and got some hoses as well as new shut-off valves on my way to my parents' house. Working under a sink is an uncomfortable job as it involves lying on your back and using a special wrench to disconnect the hoses. I was hoping that I would simply be able to change the hoses and be good to go. However, the valves under the sink started leaking. I was expecting this, hence why I got the shut-off valves. Unfortunately, replacing them meant shutting off the water to the entire house, removing the old valves, cleaning and applying flux to the copper pipes, then soldering on the new valves. But once I got everything installed, it was working, and no leaks. When I was finished, I gave my mum a copy of the invoice and told her she could send me the check later, as I had another job I needed to get to. She said, "Oh, that's all right," and handed me $20. I asked what the $20 was for, and she told me that it was for the entire job. I told her that it wasn't enough and that I expected the rest of the money when she wrote the check. She told me that she never agreed to pay me that much, even though I told her when she initially called me that I would be charging my usual rate. She asked me why I was charging so much when $20 used to be the amount she paid me. I told her that $20 was fine when I was living with her and still in school, but this is my actual job now, hence why I'm charging the same rate I charge my other customers, something that I thought she already knew. She asked if I could give her a family discount, and I agreed to waive the trip fee, though I still insisted she pay me for everything else, as I was doing this job as part of my normal work day, and I can't make a living on $20 per project. We argued about it for several minutes and I was running late for my next job, so I packed up my stuff and went on my way. When I got home, both my parents were on my case about not giving them a family discount, and I reiterated that this was my job and I can't make a living constantly giving discounts. I feel like my prices are reasonable and my friends are on my side, but my parents are continuing to give me a hard time. AITAS. Edit. I scheduled this job as part of my regular workday, and I already gave my mum a rough estimate for what the job would entail, which included my regular hourly fee as well as money for parts. I did, however, waive my trip fee, and I had told her all of this, which is why it took me by surprise when she gave me $20 for the entire job. If this were a day where I was visiting my parents, and while I was there one of the hoses sprung a leak, paying me $20 for the whole thing would have made more sense, but this cut into my regular workday, and if Mum hadn't asked me to come over during my workday, I would have been at another customer's house. Edit. This is not a job one should undertake unless they know exactly what they're doing, as it involves soldering, which is something that most people would not feel comfortable doing on their own, and shouldn't attempt unless they know what they are doing. Edit. $20 is the amount my parents would pay me for the occasional odd job. While I was living with them, and going to community college, they paid for most of my expenses and the occasional odd job was maybe once a month. This is no longer the case. I am completely independent from my parents. I live in an apartment with a roommate and split the cost of the rent with him, and pay for everything else myself. This job I did for my parents was somewhat of an emergency, as they couldn't shut the water off. I agreed to waive my usual travel fee, but otherwise charged them my normal rate, which my mum initially agreed to. The $20 for the entire project didn't come up until after the work was done, and I told her I'd send the invoice later, but had somewhere else I needed to be right then.